to thank you all very much. I want to thank Denise and Paul for letting me share time with them. I'm very humbled to be here to speak about such an important event and events. I'm an attorney and I currently represent Arlo Looking Cloud. I've represented Arlo for approximately 3.5 years, since February of 2008. Rather than me attempt to describe Arlo or talk to you about him and his personality, I'm going to, at the end, read some words from him that can best describe where he is at now. And I want to now go back in time and let you know how I came from, at one point, representing Leonard Peltier to where I am today, representing Arlo Looking Cloud and seeking justice for Annie Mae Aquash. Back in about late 2001, early 2002, I became an attorney for Peltier, and primarily looking for the search for Freedom of Information documents. At that point in time, we had been given about 32,000 documents. There were many other documents out there, and I, along with a fellow named Mike Kuzma, searched through all the field offices to get more documents, and it turned out there were another 130,000 documents. But let's put that issue aside. The bottom line is, at that time in my life, I was a neophyte, a baby. I knew of Native struggles, but I didn't know much about Peltier's case. I didn't know much about the American Indian movement other than what I'd read on Wounded Knee and what I'd read in Matheson's book and in some other books. And so while I was worked with Leonard and the Defense Committee, I was involved with many people, and of course there was a lot of rhetoric that I didn't have the capability to filter at that point in time. Of course, if you didn't agree with someone, you were a Fed. If you did this, you were a Fed. And of course, this person's a Fed, that person's a Fed. There was a lot of paranoia and blame on the federal government. And that's sort of the mentality that pervaded working with the Defense Committee during that time period. Now, in about 2003 was when the indictments came down relative to Arlo Looking Cloud and John Graham. And from that point forward, the landscape for Leonard's release, in my opinion, changed significantly. Prior to that time, he, of course, had sought clemency from President Clinton, which was denied. He had then resurrected in attempts after President Clinton to work and rejuvenate. But now, when people were indicted for the murder of Annie Mae Aquash, Leonard's name started coming up in newspapers and accounts. And at that point in time, again, I'm learning things, but I don't know a lot. And at this point in time, in 2003, I'm buying into the story that had been told that the FBI had her murdered. The FBI murdered her and covered it up, putting aside the issue of whether or not there was any involvement by the FBI. Leave that for another day. There are some issues, but at that point, the entire rhetoric and it was being spun as that don't pay attention to what is happening. These guys are innocent. We did nothing wrong. Look at what the FBI did. They cut off her hands. They covered it up. And so that became the rhetoric of 2003. But as Leonard's name became more and more involved in the situation, I realized that his biggest challenge for freedom for him was, as I viewed it at that time, was clearing his name and making sure that he could get to the public that he didn't have any involvement, which meant to me I had to learn as much as I could about this matter so that I could assist him in fighting the shadows, because at this point in time, he was being accused of many things. There were but we didn't know who was making the accusations. We didn't know what was occurring, who was saying what. There was a lot of accusations about Leonard having given an order. In fact, on Amazon.com, when Dennis Banks's book came out, there was a book review right next to Dennis's book on Amazon, which indicated that Leonard gave the order. Now, Dennis, in his book, ignores the whole issue of the murder and never even mentions that. So I called Dennis and asked him, why is this in a book review when it has nothing to do with your book? In any event, the bottom line to me was that Leonard was going to be seeking parole, that putting aside the issue of the killing of the two agents and what occurred at that time, the murder of Annie Mae Aquash would be the last nail in his coffin, because if he was implicated in that, he already had 2 life sentences, and it certainly was going to be the death knell for his name to be involved. So at that point in time, I viewed that representing Leonard, it was important to me to learn as much of the case so that I could help fight the shadows, that I could put some substance to comments, and rather than just use the age-old rhetoric that had no substance. Well, what I've learned in the 8 years of my reviewing hundreds of thousands of documents, speaking with numerous people, has left me saddened and changed my perspective on a lot of things. And I'll get to that as we evolve into it. I'll be very brief because I know I don't want to cut into anyone's lunch, but let me so quickly move along. Well, this leads to the issue of what Paul mentioned with respect to the lawsuit. In or about early 2003, in an editorial in News from Indian Country, Paul wrote, I have right here the quote, "The primary motive for the murder of Annie Mae Pictou Aquash by the members of AIM was in mid-December, alleging that her knowledge that Leonard Peltier had shot the 2 agents and that he was convicted." Now, sorry, I thought I dropped the computer, but I dropped paper instead, sorry. So Paul printed that. There were no names in the article. Of course, he was protecting the names of the people who gave him the information. They weren't ready to come forward. It wasn't the time for them to come forward. but as part of what I saw as my responsibility to zealously represent Peltier was that we could no longer allow people to make accusations without putting the names to it and without revealing the sources and providing solid evidence. So on May 1st, 2003, I, on behalf of Peltier, filed a lawsuit against Paul in federal court in Minnesota, alleging defamation, libel, that in fact Peltier hadn't admitted shooting the agents, that that the motive for killing Annie Mae Aquash didn't involve Peltier. And that lawsuit moved forward. But again, the reason why that lawsuit was brought was as part of my defense plan and others at that time to try to put faces to the shadows who were making accusations. Now, there's an interesting side note to this that very few people know, but while that lawsuit was pending, because we finally settled it in 2004, I'm convinced that the reason it settled is that Paul couldn't reveal who had made these statements yet. And certainly, as it was leading up to the trial of Arlo Looking Cloud in 2004, he couldn't compromise these people or compromise their health and safety as to what they said. Putting aside the issue for now, whether or not what they said is true, I can't comment because of my former representations of Peltier, but the bottom line is, from Paul's perspective, he had to protect his sources. And the other irony is that I primarily defended the press and libel suits, and this is one of my first suits where I was on the other side. That's just a side note. I had spent, actually, Gannett was a client of ours that I had spent many times representing in defamation suits. But one of the interesting things, as I'm looking into this case, Arlo Looking Cloud was going to trial on a Tuesday, I think it was in February of 2004. And I remember this very distinctly because my wife and I were driving into Boston to go to a concert. I can't remember who the concert was, but we were driving in, and I got a call on my cell phone, and it was Bruce Ellison. And I said, "Bruce, what's going on?" And Bruce says to me, "Hey, Kamook Nichols is going to testify at Arlo's trial that Leonard admitted shooting the two agents." And of course, I'm in disbelief that Kamook or anyone would say this. So I talked to Bruce for a bit, and thereafter tried to get a hold of Attorney Wrench to no avail. And sure enough, Kamook testified, as she has consistently said, that Leonard admitted shooting the two agents while they were traveling in the Brando motorhome. And that led to, and the conviction of Arlo Looking Cloud led to me continuing even harder to find out what really happened here, what occurred. And again, not willing to believe what was being said about Peltier, I fought even harder to find out everything I could about this getting Freedom of Information documents, as many as I could. Steve Hendricks wrote a book and shared his documents with me. I got documents from others. I spoke to virtually all the major players, and actually, though I wasn't officially representing Looking Cloud, Vernon Bellecourt in 2004 approached me and asked me to help Terry Gilbert, and I actually wrote part of Arlo's appellate brief and was working with Terry Gilbert, and I had spoken to Looking Cloud Arlo at one point, and I remember I was at a wellness check for my 5-year-old, and Arlo called, and my wife was none too happy that I took the call, but I'm talking to Arlo. But Arlo had a distrust for me at that point, which I later learned was mainly because I was representing Leonard and had a lot of contacts with AIM leadership. And so Arlo really didn't want to follow up with me. He had a few conversations at that point in time, and that was about it. But I always was interested that the fact that Vernon would call me regularly when he wanted something and was calling me regularly to help represent Arlo, and then in connection with Graham, apparently he didn't realize I was representing Arlo. He wanted me to help represent Graham, which I wouldn't have done anyway, let alone the fact that I had a conflict representing Arlo. But it always sort of intrigued me how much Vernon was trying to control the defenses in this matter. But putting that aside, we did settle the matter with Paul. Paul made a vanilla statement. It actually settled. Bob Robidoux was on a conference call, and I think I was on the call with you and Bob. And Paul made a rather vanilla statement, did not recant what he had been told by the witnesses, but merely made statements which I believe he'd agree with today, that Peltier didn't get a fair trial. That's what got me involved in Peltier's case, is reading what occurred, even the court decisions. The trial was unfair, and being an attorney, one of the sacred things is that you have to receive a fair trial. In any event, we settled the matter with Paul, and things just progressed from there. I spoke to people in Denver. I spoke a lot with Bob Robidoux, who actually had a lot of information and had been investigating this. I spoke to people in Denver, as I said. I spoke to people directly, allegedly involved, and by in or about 2006, what I saw in the rearview mirror was a totally different story or facts than what I had been led to believe and what I thought was the case. It really disheartened me as I learned more. I had come into this thinking very highly of the AIM leadership. I still think very highly of what AIM should have stood for, and what many of the grassroots and the people who really work for AIM and what it stands for. But I was left very disgusted with what I'd learned about the leadership and what I learned about what occurred in this matter and those on the periphery of the leadership. I also, through Paul, had the pleasure of, in or about, I think it was 2006, 2007, speaking with Jean Moore. I never met Jean, but I did speak to her on the phone several times. Always an upbeat woman, obviously had a number of health issues, but always upbeat. She was, her son, Johnny Moore, as Paul mentioned, was murdered in the non-leadership trials in Lincoln, Nebraska. Jean had been able to get about 60 documents through FOIA requests many years earlier. I renewed FOIA requests and ended up getting, I think, about 300 documents, which I shared with her, but she already knew what occurred, and she knew what happened. And for me, it was more of an enlightenment to me as to the thuggery of a number of AIM members, and even the philosophies of some of their attorneys who were involved. So by about 2006, I had become very disillusioned. Again, not with Native struggles, but with the AIM leadership, which I think turned more to sex, money, and drugs than they did cared for their people. And I would tell that to their face if they were here. In any event, by early 2007, I resigned from the Leonard Peltier Defense Committee. I had once worked for a large firm, about 65 or 70. They were not too enthralled with my work for Leonard, and ironically, there was a parting of the ways because I worked for Leonard and several other causes that they weren't particularly fond of, so I parted ways, started my own law firm in January of 2007 and realized that I just didn't have the time to work for Leonard, and I left his organization about April of 2007. I continued to stay in contact with Bob Robideau. I continued to look into the Anna Mae Aquash murder because I really wanted to find out as much as I could, and I continue to find out things today. That said, it was I continued to get phone calls. I always gotten phone calls from Arlo's family because apparently the attorneys he had, Wrench, Gilbert, and the subsequent attorney never communicated with Arlo and never returned the family's calls. And even though I didn't represent him, they were calling me. They'd call me regularly, and I returned everyone's phone call. And in or about late 2007, early 2008, the family approached Arlo and they asked me if I would help him. And again, I had just started my own firm. I knew this would be pro bono work, but I was very interested in the matter. I had always felt that Arlo, it is hard, you can't say that, you just can't say that someone didn't do anything. I always felt that Arlo was sort of a patsy for the leadership and many other people. I mean, there's at least 20 to 30 names you could rattle off who were involved in this, and more significantly involved than Arlo. And so I knew he had been convicted. I knew he had a habeas corpus pending. I knew he had not gotten good legal counsel. So I was interested to see how I could help him. And now that I had left Peltier, Arlo was willing to talk to me. And I went down to Pollock, Louisiana in February 2008. And I met with Arlo. And Arlo immediately, well, not immediately, it takes some time after I saw him for 2 days, told me what occurred and actually started giving me some new information that he had been afraid to tell before because of fear that these people would cause retribution or harm him or his family. And so I talked to Arlo, and it was real clear to me that, particularly with the new information, that Arlo would be best served by cooperating. That's where his mindset was, and that's I didn't dissuade him from it. I didn't try to say, no, you got to push it this way or that way. In any event, I met with him then. I met a couple more times down in Louisiana with him. And then we approached the then U.S. Attorney, Marty Jackley, who couldn't make any promises, but listened to Arlo, and based on that information, Dickie Marshall was indicted and tried. The result was not what it probably should have been, but as people know the legal system, you never know what's going to happen. Being an attorney, I know that. In any event, Arlo opened up and he wanted to do this. But Arlo, I have to say, through the years had built up many defense mechanisms. Imagine yourself being a 21-year-old going out looking for, he got involved in this instead of going to his son's first birthday with his then fiance. His son's birthday was November 29th of 75. He chooses to stay at home for a drinking over Thanksgiving, and goes to Troy and Lynn's apartment looking for one of his drinking buddies who isn't there, and gets, I can say commandeered into a trip that turned out to be personal hell for him, and obviously should be a personal hell for many others, that led to the murder of Annie Mae Aquash. In any event, Arlo, over the years, had built up, it was like an onion, many layers of defense. And he would tell the facts as if he was as if he was out here looking at it, and never accepted any responsibility. Well, as we all know now, John Graham's been convicted, despite a lot of promises in his defense that he would show A, B, C, and D. He showed nothing and didn't get up to say what, to support any of his claims. And that's on appeal, but he's been convicted. As Dickie Marshall was acquitted, we'll leave that alone. Thelma Rios was convicted based on a plea. And so now Arlo is still in prison. It's been tough for him the past 3 years. Any of us know the code of you don't want to be a snitch or a rat. He lives in constant fear for his life. I have intervened many times over the past couple of years to make sure and try to keep him safe, because I believe his safety is of utmost importance. And the problem is he is considered a snitch or a rat, but I don't think he is. I'm not a big fan of so-called tattletales, and I grew up, you don't tattletale, you don't do, but I think what I'm going to read you from Arlo's heart explains why he should be commended for not what occurred 35 years ago. No one can be commended for that. But I think he should be commended for what he's done now, putting his life on the line, as he should, because he didn't 35 years ago. He had opportunities, and he'll tell you, he had opportunities to help Annie Mae Aquash. He could have manned up and done something to save her. He didn't, and he regrets it. So let me close with some words from Arlo that he's wrote to me in his own language, in English in his own handwriting. I unfortunately don't understand Lakota, and so he didn't write it to me in that. I, Arlo Looking-Cloud, sincerely apologize to the family of Annie Mae Aquash. I would like to I want them to know that an apology does not begin to make what happened right. I am aware that many people have been impacted by this case, especially Annie Mae's children. I want them to heal. The events of those days haunt me, and have since this happened. I feel responsible and take full responsibility for my role. I wish I could go back in time and change things. Wish I had done something. So many things different. The best I can do to bring justice is to cooperate with authorities and make sure all responsible parties are brought to justice. In this case, I think those words are so important. It's time for everyone to step up and tell the truth instead of hiding it. Arlo has stepped up and told the truth, and he knows that apologizing doesn't help. There's nothing, no apology can make Denise or her sister or her family feel better. The only thing, and I'm not even sure that will necessarily make them feel better, but the only possible thing is to get justice for their mother and have the people who were involved brought to justice. And if the people who are involved won't tell the truth, then I hope everyone else does. Thank you very much.